Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to lecture 3 of chapter 5, fracture mechanisms in metals. As usual, we will quickly review what we covered in lecture 2. Today we will continue with the discussion of void growth and coalescence. Once that is complete, we will start ductile crack growth, and inside there we will see the interrelationship of ductile crack growth to CTOD, the crack tip opening displacement. Later on, we will move into the topic of cleavage and, if time allows, fractography in cleavage and some other minor topics. So let us see what we did in. We started with this diagram on void, nucleation, growth and coalescence. We tried to explain the different things in that diagram and other. And because there was a discussion of precipitates and bimodal, trimodal, so I added some portion to the lectures. So I'm now calling it supporting explanatory material. We talked about intermetallics, bimodal, trimodal, particle size distribution, and then we reminded from basic material science the various strengthening mechanisms in metals and alloys, especially the relationship between strength and hardness on the one side and grain size on the other through the Hall-Petch equation. And then in strengthening mechanisms, cold working or strain hardening, grain size reduction, solid solution strengthening, and heat treatment, right? And we explained or revised these methods. As heat treatment is very important, and you have covered it in material science and engineering materials and so on. So heat treatment of metals, annealing, hardening, age hardening, tempering, and those things. And then with this slight excursion away from the main chapter, now back to chapter. So, right, the cup and cone effect and so on, especially on the next page, and how ductile fracture goes away and shear fracture, 45-degree angles. So we showed you this formation of cup and cone fracture surface under uniaxial tension, which later on creates triaxial state of stress and so on, and then showing you that in an actual broken piece which has broken under tensile loading, this shear fracture at 45-degree really happens, and that there are lots of small voids which are created and then they start joining together. Later on, now we are going to explain at a enlarged microscopic view the same things, fractography, right? Photographs of fracture surfaces at microscope. So we showed you these dimples and so on of the cup, close up where you are seeing the hard particles and so inclusions in the middle of the dimple. And then in the end, we said that there are different mathematical models for void growth and coalescence, Rice and Tracy and so forth. So that is where we left last time, and we want to continue from there today. So let us start today's lecture. We will start from the same slide where we left it last time. So we were saying that there are a number of mathematical models for void growth and coalescence. Two most widely referenced models means two models which many other researchers have used as a basic reference. One is Rice and Tracy, the other is the Gerson model. We will see in figure 510 on the next page the Rice and Tracy model. There is a single void in an infinite solid. That is what they assume. The remote normal stresses are sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3, if you remember the plane stresses, and the remote normal strain rates epsilon 1, epsilon 2, epsilon 3, but dot is strain rate, right? Change of strain per unit time. The initial void is assumed to be spherical in this model, and becomes ellipsoidal as it deforms, right? It starts as a ball, football, and once you elongate it and it is loaded, then it deforms into an ellipsoidal shape. And Rice and Tracy analyzed both rigid plastic and linear strain hardening material behavior. One lecture or two lectures ago, remember, we revised for you the material models. So one is rigid plastic. Rigid means that there are no serous deformations occurring. That is one thing. And plastic is plastic deformation only. Linear strain hardening, remember that from the yield strength until the ultimate strength is the strain hardening region. In a real material, it is a curve. But just to have mathematical simplicity, we can assume that the strain hardening from the yield point to the ultimate strain, ultimate strength, it's a straight line, right? So they assumed these models, and we will discuss them. So this is the basic diagram, free body diagram, or not really, right? So in the middle there is a spherical, right? Here we are seeing just the front surface, but a spherical flaw of radius R0, right? And all the three, right? Sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3, the three stresses in the three principal directions, and epsilon 1, epsilon 2, epsilon 3 are the strains. But in the theory, they are using the strain rate rather than the strain, because we have remarked so many times earlier that the rate at which you load the material is very critical. In a tensile test, if you apply a very slowly increasing tensile load or a very quickly increasing tensile load, the results will be different. So Rice and Tracy, void growth in variety of stress states could be approximated by the following semi-empirical relationship. Again, we are excluding the mathematical derivation, and you know the term semi-empirical now. An empirical relationship means it is 100% based on experimental data and curve fitting. Semi-empirical means that you are applying some basic physics or mechanics and joining it together with experimental data. So this type of a model is called a semi-empirical model. So ln R bar upon R0 is 0.283, integral 0 from equivalent to strain, right, to epsilon equivalent. Exponent of this, rather than writing e raised to this, right, it is actually e raised to 1.5 sigma m upon sigma ys, and d epsilon equivalent plastic, right. So all the things you know except these. R bar is the same as we defined earlier, R1 plus R2 plus R3 by 3. It is not the same, right? Earlier we were writing that sigma bar or the von Mises stress is the average stress and so on, mean, right? Here R is some value, R0, and R1, R2, R3 are the values, and it is divided by 3. And this epsilon equivalent plastic is the equivalent von Mises plastic strain, right? Equivalent von Mises plastic strain. For definitions of R1, R2 and R3, right, that include the quantities phi, A and B, see equations 5 to 10 ABC in the book, right? So that is why, because I wanted to avoid the detailed mathematical expression. But if in some problem I ask you to find R bar, then there will be equations for R1, R2, R3, which is equation 510. 510A, 510B, 510C. So there are 3 equations for R1, R2, R3 if you go into the book. So if we give you a problem which requires to use these values, then you can get them. And in these equations, phi and A and B, these quantities are there. I am just sort of skipping all of that, and I'm saying that whatever was R1, R2 and R3, R bar is the average of that. Okay. Later researchers worked on it, the Rice and Tracy model, tried to improve it. This equation could be approximately modified for strain hardening by replacing the yield strength with sigma E, the effective stress. So you see, whenever, I have told you so many times, whenever a new theory comes in and there is no explanation of that mechanics or that physics earlier, then it's very, very tough. So even a basic treatment takes a long time. So Rice and Tracy did that. But now once a model is there and the development of its mechanics and physics is explained and the logic is there scientifically, then later researchers said that we could have another equation which gives approximate results for this, approximate results, and we can use strain hardening now rather than the basic yield strength model. Because if you use just the yield strength and you are saying that it is a perfectly yielding material, right? So it is a basic material. You are saying that as soon as the plastic deformation starts, then the stress remains constant. But linear strain hardening is a much higher level model. And of course, then they use the effective von Mises stress. The Rice and Tracy model is based on a single void, right? It is based on that there is a plate or whatever, and there is a single flaw there. Actually, there will be many flaws. We have seen so many times that flaws are there, and when you apply the load, these flaws start to enlarge and then they coalesce. So what is the thing? That because it is based on single void, so it does not take into account interaction between voids. If there were 2 or 3 voids, then after growing, they will interact with each other. But because this model, for simplicity's sake, it is a very complex model already, but for simplicity's sake, it is using only one single spherical void. So there is no interaction between voids. Also, it does not predict ultimate failure. This equation is there and you can find a few things, but how will the ultimate failure happen? This model does not predict it. Separate failure criterion must be applied to characterize microvoid coalescence, right? So if there is one single void, spherical in nature, how would it grow? Yes. But if you want to finalize failure criterion, then we have to add, right, microvoid coalescence. For example, assume that fracture occurs when the nominal void radius reaches a critical value, right? That this void is there, one circular spherical, and then it starts to enlarge. So now because it is not interacting with other ones, so you don't have a theory for coalescence. But how does it fail? So if you put that when this spherical void reaches a critical size, then it will start to fail. So that type of a failure criterion will have to be added, otherwise this model will not give failure result. Later on, one of the researchers, Thomason, put a simple limit load model for internal necking between microvoids, right? So this is now a serious improvement on the Rice and Tracy model, that there is an interaction now between the microvoids, and that we have told you that if there is one void here and one void here, when they grow, sort of necking happens between the two, right? So Thomason used that, a simple limit load model, that there is a load at which this internal necking between the microvoids starts to happen. So failure occurs when the net section stress between the voids reaches a critical value, right? Do you understand? So this is now an improvement, that this Thomason model will assume that there are at least 2 voids and necking starts to happen between them, and the net stress between them should be more than a certain critical value. And when that happens, then failure will start to happen.